So it's now been 8 months and the M4 MacBook Air has dropped in price to $749 brand new on Amazon. So now, does that make this laptop the best value laptop of all time? Let's talk about it. So not to ruin the surprise here, but in short, yes, the M4 MacBook Air at $749 has to be the best valued laptop of all time, because to contextualize this a little bit, let's see exactly what you get for that $749. And again, it all starts with that M4 chip. There's no hiding the fact that the M series chip, when Apple released it in the 2020 MacBook Air, completely changed the game with efficiency, productivity, being able to do so much more and so much quicker without having to make the computer sweat whatsoever. Prior to that, those Intel-based MacBooks, well, of course, for the time, did what they needed to do. They were very inefficient. Battery life ended up taking a huge toll, especially in these smaller laptops like the MacBook Air. And there was a lot of limitations. And not only that, but it was extremely expensive to get the same kind of like equivalent power that we're getting with these new M4 and M5 chip computers. So for $750, what are you getting here? We're talking about the 13.6-inch M4 MacBook Air. So you get that beautiful kind of unibody design made out of aluminum, and it feels and looks extremely premium. It only weighs about 2.7 pounds for the 13-inch version, and only 3.3 pounds for the 15.4-inch version, which is also on sale for, I believe, $1,050, where normally it's $1,400, another one to consider. And I will leave these linked down below because the $750 price is an all-time low. But you get 4 beautiful colors to choose from, and again, it's an Apple product, so it's made and built to feel like a premium product. There's no plastic in this, it doesn't creak, it doesn't bend. Everything about this just screams Apple and high-end. And then in terms of port selection, you do get the MagSafe charger on there, which is something that I actually don't use at all. I just charge via USB-C, but you get 2 Thunderbolt 4 USB-C ports. You also get your headphone jack, and then you also get things like Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.3. So when it comes to the port selection, there isn't a lot of variety here, but again, for $750, the fact that you have a Thunderbolt 4 port and you get 2 of them is always a welcome sign, because you can always get Thunderbolt 4 ports and Thunderbolt 4 dongles and hubs and things like that to really expand your storage options. I do wish there was SD card support and maybe an HDMI port as well for those people that like to use those on a daily basis, but then again, then you wouldn't have an incentive to go over and get a MacBook Pro, because those MacBook Pros will have those ports. So again, you are limited to the selection, but there's still high-end quality ports that give you a lot of variety after the fact. And because it does have that super efficient M4 chip, you do get 14 to 16 hours of real-world use battery life. And I mean real-world use. I put this thing through its paces, from editing a bunch of high-end 4K footage, to thumbnail editing, to just watching videos endlessly. I am getting 12 to 13 to 14 hours of intense use on a MacBook Air without really losing any power or throttling down. I'm not doing anything crazy like 3D rendering or VFX, which could take a big toll on the battery life as well as the RAM on there. But overall, it handles, I would say, 90 to 95% of what most people will be using this laptop for. It handles it with no sweat whatsoever, and the battery life stays extremely efficient. And to segue into it, I do want to talk about that price to performance ratio, because the amount of computer you're getting outside of all the hardware specs that I just mentioned is insane at that $749 price point. And it's even aged well over the 8 months that we've had this M4 MacBook Air. And so to this day, it still feels brand new. You have instant app launches. I can open up as many as I want to without it kind of breaking a sweat. I open up 20 to 30 Chrome tabs. I use something called Comet, which is another browser, but it's still based off of Chromium. So it's kind of similar in terms of its RAM management and its RAM usage, but it doesn't stutter whatsoever. I have Safari tabs open. I have multiple videos playing in the background, multiple audio streams. Everything that I throw at this laptop, it handles it, and it handles it magically. And again, on the surface level, for the most part, most people will be using this for Slack communication, for maybe Microsoft Teams, for email, for iMessage, for maybe some schoolwork, like going into their school portal, maybe a lot of documents, a lot of typewriting, a lot of maybe AI like ChatGPT or Perplexity. So a lot of these things that are kind of research-based functions and a lot of document-based functions, this is going to handle it with no problems whatsoever. And if you want to have something in the background playing, like a podcast or some sort of ambient noise, or maybe a video playing in the background, it'll be able to handle all that as well. And even if you do have a little bit more, if you are using this as a workhorse, if you are editing videos in 4K 60, if you have multiple layers, if you have some audio files that you're dealing with, maybe if you need to edit something inside of Affinity Photo or in Photoshop, it'll also be able to handle that with no problems whatsoever, as long as your file sizes stay relatively tame, right? If you're dealing with maybe a 50 gigabyte file, then yes, you're going to be a little bit limited, especially because you only have 256 gigs of storage internally, but that is something to take into consideration in terms of what you can do on this laptop. And I'm going to continue to say this, 95% of the use cases that people will be using this laptop for, it'll be able to handle with no problems whatsoever. And even though there is no fan, it'll still stay cool to the touch because of how efficient everything's being processed. And if you are somebody who needs to get a little bit more, you know who you are, so you would probably go and gravitate towards a MacBook Pro, or if maybe you need a little bit more, I would recommend maybe upgrading to 24 gigs of RAM internally if you do need a little bit more when it comes to multitasking especially, but for the most part the baseline model will be more than enough for most people. And then to contextualize the value even that much more when it comes to maybe comparing it to something on the Windows side, some comparisons that we saw on here were something like maybe the Windows equivalent, which is going to be an Asus ZenBook 14. Even though that does have an OLED display, which from a hardware standpoint is a better display, that laptop is $1,600 starting, and I would argue that you get a better computer overall from the MacBook Air in terms of its capabilities because of what it can do overall on a long period of time. But compared to that ZenBook S14, the MacBook Air is still better in battery life, it's still more portable, it still is noiseless because it has no fan versus ZenBook does have a fan, and the heat management and heat dissipation is just second to none compared to something like that ZenBook. Yes, like I mentioned, it has an OLED display, and maybe on paper it might do a little bit more from a chipset standpoint, but overall, for $750, less than half the price of a Windows machine, you're getting about that much value in my opinion. And now before we get into what aged best with this laptop versus what aged worse with this laptop, definitely consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoy videos like this one where we give you long-term reviews of some of Apple's best products, especially when it comes to price to performance ratio, which is what I'm all about. But in terms of what aged best with this thing, it's going to be the speed, consistency over time. Like I said, it hasn't really slowed down at all, it hasn't bogged down at all. I have the baseline version, the 16 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage, and we'll touch on that in a second. But battery life has also stayed very consistent, getting me anywhere from 12 to 16 hours depending on what I'm doing. The keyboard and the trackpad have held up tremendously. That trackpad is another thing that's second to none. I mean, if you start to zoom out a little bit, yes, you can get the same internals on a Mac Mini for $499, but the trackpad alone, if you want to get a Magic trackpad from Apple, I believe it's $129 or $149. And then if you want to get a Magic keyboard from Apple, the small one, that's also another $100. So even with just those two in a Mac Mini, without even dealing with a display yet, you are now at that $750 price point. And the display on that MacBook Air has been fantastic, and for the price point, there's nothing else you're going to be able to find that's going to be better. And another great thing about the M4 chip that you get versus the M3 chip is that you are able to have up to 2 monitors connected to it while using it with the laptop open, versus before you had to go into clamshell mode, and even before that with the M2 chip, you can only have 1 monitor connected to it. So little by little, we are getting more productivity focused kind of features with hardware. So the M4 chip does unlock 2 monitors with the laptop open. And then the things that have aged the worst for me personally has to be the fact that it is 256 gigs of storage and we are in 2025. Now, I am a big believer in getting external storage because the premiums to pay Apple to get more internal storage is just not worth it. So I get myself a Samsung T9 or an external SSD from Lexar, and you can use those to run all your applications in the back end without having to put anything really onto the laptop itself, and that's been working fine for me over time. But it is annoying that I have to kind of play this file gymnastics every now and then to make sure I stay clear and I have a decent amount of storage internally left on my laptop. And also the fact that there's only 2 ports, you do have to bring a dongle with you if you want a little bit more out of it from a versatility standpoint, but again, beggars can't be choosers at the $750 price point, in my opinion. So let me know in the comment down below what you think. Have you tried the M4 MacBook Air? Do you have an M series Mac at all? Have you tried the new M series chips since they released in 2020? If you haven't, I recommend just going into an Apple store and just sitting on one of those laptops and opening up every single app over and over and over again and seeing that these things can handle pretty much everything that you throw. Because I remember back in 2019, I bought myself an i7 MacBook Air, spent about $1,500–$1,600 to load it up with internal storage and better RAM, and it was obsolete like I think 6 months later when the M1 MacBook Air came out and kind of ran circles all around it. But like I said, that'll do it for this video, everybody. Let me know in the comment down below what you think. I'm extremely excited to see what people are going to do with this $750 MacBook Air. And like I said, the 15-inch version I believe is $1,050, which is also $350 off. And you still have the Mac Mini, which right now is $499 on Amazon. And be on the lookout for my Black Friday video coming out soon to give you guys the best bang for buck on all things Apple, especially when it comes to Amazon. But that'll do it, everybody. If you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin. Let me know what you think about the MacBook Air. And until next time, I'm Fernando. Peace, everybody. Check out one of these videos, like my $499 iMac Mini review. Definitely worth a watch.